we need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed. The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere. We must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
This is Dave Debo. Coming up on the program today, we might be broadening our scope just a little bit. But I think, and if you listen all the time, you probably know this, there is a common theme here. We spotlight the needs of people who have needs, the lack of resources in some communities, and that also occurs in the disability community.
If you qualify for disability, that means you've had extensive medical history. So cost of care is huge. Especially as you get older through the stages of your life, medications are huge, right? What if you have to have some specific therapies? Maybe that's, it's countless of things that you need based on your illness that puts you in the position you are now. And, the income is not that great. It's there to serve as a bare means of making ends meet.
That's Garrett Bush. He's also a sports talk host in Cleveland, so Damar Hamlin will come up in his conversation with Emyle Watkins toward the end of this program. But first, here's Jay Moran.
We're at the Broadway Market today, and we're talking with Greg Brown. Greg, among everything that he has done in his time, he's currently a sports columnist with The Challenger. Before that, a former assistant U.S. attorney, lifelong Buffalo resident. We've got a lot of other things that we could talk about in a lot of ways. So, Greg, thanks for joining us on Buffalo What's Next. Oh, my pleasure. It is a pleasure to talk to you because one thing I found out about you is you most certainly have a great attention to detail, and being a lifelong Buffalo resident of the east side of Buffalo, a Bennett High School graduate, as a matter of fact.
Yes. We Tigers.
You go Tigers, and of course just won the state football championship. But when you were there, you were a teammate of Bob Lanier, the NBA, the Basketball Hall of Famer, probably, I would say, the greatest athlete to come out of Buffalo. That would be my opinion. I suppose we could start a whole debate on that.
I would share that opinion.
Yeah, what was it like? During those times with Bob Lanier? I'm star-crossed. So tell me about it.
That was a great time in my young life, just to be on the Bennett High School basketball team. Let me make it perfectly clear that I had nothing to do with those great Bennett High teams. I mean, I at best carried Bob's duffel bag. But I was on the team, I was there, so it's something that over the years gives me a lot of pride and joy. What was it like? Back in those days, Bennett High School, our basketball team at least, we felt like we were the UCLA of high school basketball. Certainly around here we were. And you're a sports fan, so you'll know that in those days, John Wooden and his legendary UCLA basketball teams with Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and all those other great players were, always winning national titles. And, we at Bennett for those last 2 years of Bob's tenure, his junior and senior year, which were my sophomore and junior year. Bennett was, we were the standard for high school basketball around the city. And so it was great to be a part of that.
Among Bob Lanier's nicknames over his career, Moses was one of his nicknames.
Is that so?
Moses.
Okay.
What kind of person was Bob Lanier? What stuck out? Now, obviously, you knew him when he was just a teenager. We all changed from our teen years, don't we, Greg, to where we are as adults. But what was Bob like?
Interesting. Bob was a smart guy, as a student. He was a good student. Bob, I would say, if I can make an assessment looking back that far, I'd say Bob was probably a little bit on the immature side. He was a playful guy, could be a little silly, but he was also Bob Lanier. He had gifts that only God can give. one of the pivotal moments, I think, in Bob's high school career, in his life, really, was when he was cut from the basketball team out his sophomore year at Bennett. He had, come to Bennett as a sophomore, I think, out of Fillmore Junior High. And a lot of other great athletes came out of that junior high school group in Fillmore. They included my brother, a guy named Joe Breeze, who became the starting point guard on those teams. My brother, who is founding out.
God bless y'all.
How you doing?
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Y'all be singing since stay cool.
All right. Let me try.
You look like a hard ass.
No, man, I'm not.
I'm good.
All right. Plus, you too, man.
We gotta look for professionals.
All right.
I love y'all.
Thank you.
For long. And sing.
Thank you, sir. That's what I was saying about doing it at the Broadway Market.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Absolutely.
There.
Yeah, I think when, though, Bob got cut from the Bennett High School team, it impacted him enormously. And probably in many respects, in hindsight, may have been a good thing because and everyone knows this story well, everyone who follows Bob knows this story, is that after being cut from the Bennett team, he redoubled his work at the Master Boys Club, where we all sort of were rooting. And there was a gentleman at the Master Boys Club, great teacher, leader, Mr. Laurie Alexander. He worked with Bob over that winter basketball season, playing him or getting him into tournaments and just working with him. And one of the, I think, end products of that, besides Bob just improving his game, was the fact that he got some maturity about him. So when he came back to, that season with a new coach at Bennett, he was Bob Lanier. He was almost, well, he wasn't the finished product, but he was Big Bob. And, he was probably not Moses for the Bennett team. I think that, Bob was going to be a superstar at whatever high school he attended. Firstly, he was in our neighborhood, and he attended Bennett. But Bennett was already and always was noted with great talent. And, it would have been tougher without Bob and maybe impossible. But, there were enough guys who could have carried on, I think.
Switching a little bit away from sports, but it's interesting how you describe that Bennett was basically a neighborhood school, right? And yeah, it was our neighborhood school. There was a lot of people's neighborhood school. And the neighborhood school was like sort of a gerrymandered map, again, with a little of this and a little of that. And that's what Bennett had, a little of this and a little of that. And then, of course, you can't necessarily reflect as a student, but in the 70s, of course, magnet schools, segregation, things changed.
Yeah, they did.
Any thoughts about that, whether that has been for the better or for the worst?
I think it's been a mixed bag. When you talk about, the magnet school movement and what sort of underlay that magnet school movement, certainly in the city of Buffalo, was an effort to stem so much of the white flight that was affecting Buffalo back in that late 70s, early 80s period when these magnet school programs were envisioned and then created. The City Honors Program came out of the Bennett High School Honors Program. They took the Bennett High School Honors Program, lock, stock, and barrel, all of the faculty, all of the curriculum sort of development that they had from running an honors program for many, many years at Bennett, which is one of the things that made Bennett one of the premier high schools in the area. They took that program, as I say, lock, stock, and barrel, put it into a new facility and called it City Honors. And, by and large, I think City Honors has been a very worthwhile and worthy public school institution. But when you took it out of Bennett High School, I think you took a lot of the heart and character out of the Bennett. And so while you paid Peter, you robbed Paul. And I don't know that Bennett ever really, as an institution, recovered from both the demographic changes and then the loss of that, I think, essential component of its program. It's the thing that made Bennett special and different in the same way that City Honors is special and different. So, having City Honors, my daughter attended City Honors, I I feel in some ways, a connection to it. I was in the honors program at least one of my years at Bennett. I got out of it, because I didn't want to work that hard, and I wanted to play sports. Right. And being in the honors program was something that would have required more time than I wanted to devote the academic side of it. But Bennett was such a good school. You could get a good education at Bennett regardless of what so-called track you read. I was in a college entrance track, and there was a general track. But anybody who's at Bennett, you were pretty assured of getting, a competent education. Certainly in terms of what we see today in public education. So Bennett was a great place.
And in terms of college track, attended as undergrad Brown University. Later in life, you attended the University of Buffalo Law School as well. So right. I think they prepared you well, even if you weren't that willing to work that hard. So as what you call not working that hard. But I want to stay on the track of looking back a little bit. Jefferson Avenue, unfortunately, in 2022 became a focus not only of West New York, but of the nation for a while. And since we've started this show, Buffalo What's Next, we've talked a lot about Jefferson Avenue, and some people have reflected about Jefferson, what Jefferson was like at a certain time in history as compared to now. How about from your perspective? How do you see that change?
Well, when I was coming of age, Jefferson Avenue was the main avenue, the main drag of the black community. It had stores and shops and restaurants and the like. The famous Gigi's restaurant, the Scotty's Steakhouse, the Mr. C's clothing store. Jefferson Avenue was the heart of the black community. It was kind of the beating heart of the community. And as I don't want to say the fortunes of the city rose, the fortunes on Jefferson Avenue declined, but in a way, it seemed to me that there was that kind of relationship. The days of the Gigi's and the Pie Grill and, all these places, being gathering spots, in the community began to change, began to shift. And much of it, followed the demographic changes that we were referring in Buffalo. And so, right now, it's a place in need of development. If there's any good news to come out of the Tops Market massacre, it would be that it becomes a catalyst to boost Jefferson Avenue economic growth. And I hope that can happen.
The black community of Buffalo, again, maybe reflecting a time from your youth, your young adult age to where it is now. Any thoughts about how it's changed? What has changed?
I don't know. Sometimes it's been I think a story of 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, or 2 steps backwards and 1 step forward. In many ways, one can argue that, we have not shared in Buffalo or the region's general revival. That, we may be being left behind by that. Not everybody, but, large enough segments of the population that they become politically and demographically and economically significant. And that is, public education has not served well the children of Buffalo within the public schools. And I think that the longer you have ineffectual public education, the more difficult and the more intractable social and political problems become, because you're not producing the kind of citizens and leaders to really, propel the community forward. And that's what I'm feeling. And not that there are not young people, leaders and such, but I don't see a big difference between now and 1967. And frankly, I think in many respects, 1967 was maybe politically, socially, economically, a better period of time for Black Buffalo. That's open to debate, of course, just in kingdom. But, like I say, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards.
When it comes to opinions, though, and we like to give people opportunity on this program, do just that. And we can focus on the negative, of course, and the problems and the issues. I think you've outlined some of them very well. At the same time, you live in the University District, if I'm not mistaken now, and you grew up in the city of Buffalo. So there's something special about that community for you, I would think. Outline that for me. Talk to me about that. What makes it special?
Well, there's a saying, it's not an original, but they used to say, if you can make it in Buffalo, you can make it here. And I have always subscribed to that. I've lived in a few other places, West Coast, East Coast, Rochester. And one of the things that I feel I have taken from my Buffalo growing up experience is that resilience and that, feeling like, you can rise to any occasion, because you grew up, in Buffalo. Buffalo makes you do some things. When winter comes, your butt better be ready. When, football season comes, you better be ready for a heartbreak as well as, others that come with it. But, Buffalo, I think, hardens one. I think it makes one able to cope with just about any situation one will find anywhere else. And when you've grown up in Buffalo and played your Buffalo dues, I think you're ready. For challenges.
We're talking with Greg Brown, Buffalo What's Next. Greg, former assistant U.S. attorney, also current assistant U.S. Did they say U.S. But what is assistant U.S. attorney? Wow, different. I'm a mistake. I know all about not stepping on toes in certain places. We all have those types of organizations. But Greg also currently sports columnist with the Challenger. Greg, you did bring up being ready for winter in Buffalo. We just went through an amazing blizzard here in Buffalo. From your perspective, not necessarily how you necessarily fared, but as you saw your neighborhood, what can you tell us about how it went and maybe some of your feelings about it?
When the blizzard was coming, we had ample warning of its coming. I was kind of regarding it as an adventure, something to, have some fun with, to hunker down. I had plenty of food in my fridge, plenty to, eat and drink. And so, I wasn't worried about any kind of privation, and I knew I was going to be old when the blizzard came. So my only worry was that, the fire wouldn't go out, which it did for everybody across the street from me, but not on my side of the street. It was as random as that. But as the blizzard raged for those 48 plus hours, with snow was coming down sideways the entire time with so much wind, that, I went from worrying that, I could withstand the blizzard, but that my window could, my second floor window that is, really got ramshafted, was going to stand up to this blizzard. But did, thank the Lord. But that was this past one, the blizzard of 22, was even worse than the blizzard of 77 in my eyes, because what it had that the blizzard didn't have was the hurricane force winds and the bomb cyclone. I'd never heard of this bomb cyclone business, but, Buffalo had the bomb cyclone, which is where there's a temperature inversion of 40 degrees or something like that within a very short period of time, hours. And we had that. So, the temperature dropped, 40-some degrees, and it went from a rain to a freezing rain to, just the blizzard. And so the aftermath of it is when, what I was regarding at first as kind of a fun adventure just became an enduring tragedy, a nightmare.
Right.
I knew someone who had been a very dear friend of our family, you know, my mom's age. She would have been probably about 95 years old, who passed away.
Sorry to
Lost power in her home, 95 years old, couldn't withstand the exposure, and she was found, you know, after the blizzard. So, you know, there are all of those stories of tragedy and of, you know, open, you know, just the warm feeling of people doing things for other people. You know, so it ran the whole spectrum. You know, the tragedy of losing lives, the despicability of, you know, people building stores, but also the hope and inspiration of people who stepped up to, you know, to save people's lives. That's literally what it amounted to. They saved people's lives. And so the blizzard is the weather, you know, is a part of, you know, Buffalo, you know, growing up paying dues. But you definitely got to be prepared for winter. Can't have your rear end hanging out there in the winter in Buffalo.
Right.
So, you know, Buffalo's got those kind of, you know, guardrails that making, you know, behave in a certain fashion. And that is what I think, as I probably said before, and I guess reiterating this, you know, what makes Buffalo a special place to grow up in, because you know, you pay your dues here, and if you know want to take those lessons to another place, they will be definitely, you know, very applicable. You will do all right.
And so you say that, if I'm not mistaken, your children, you have one living in Atlanta, another one living in Brooklyn, so they've taken their Buffalo lessons down the road, so to speak. And we talked on this program before, asking people to kind of compare and contrast when it comes to race in other places compared to Buffalo. Do you see, in the time that you spend in these places, do you sense that? Do you feel that it's a different experience for a person of color living in Atlanta or maybe even in Brooklyn?
Well, I'd say that Atlanta, you know, impresses at least as a very progressive place for, you know, for African Americans, for Black people, in terms of professional, entrepreneurial, commercial, residential opportunities that are available maybe in that metropolis. You know, New York, Brooklyn, you know, kind of the same thing. Buffalo just is not as far down the road in that kind of both economic, commercial, but also racial advancement. You know, my experience in Buffalo has probably been I don't want to say atypical, but you know, I mean, I'm not. What am I trying to say? Struggling for a description here, but you know, I was a practicing attorney. You know, my life was pretty much involved in middle-class lifestyle. I don't want to say that's made me immune to, you know, the racial.
But is that different than that there's more maybe of a larger Black middle class in these other?
Yeah, I think that's one aspect of it. Yeah. You know, those places, just because they're more economically potent at this time.
Okay.
That there's a larger middle class. You know, for all you know, skin shapes. But you know, I think in Buffalo, we're still, you know, we're still working, you know, on that, and we're not as far along as a lot of other places. Here in Buffalo, you know, my vision is probably skewed somewhat by the fact that I live in a neighborhood that I consider relatively safe. By the fact that you know, I've had a middle class you know, economic experience. I'm retired, but you know, I don't have any real arisen retirement other than, you know, the fixed income worry that every retiree has. But you know, I feel that that's been a blessing for me. That is not necessarily, I don't want to say it's atypical, but that's not necessarily the experience for everyone, you know, in the Black community. And, you know, for a lot of people in the Black community, you know, times are hard. It's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
We like to ask, what does Buffalo need? What does Buffalo need? What can you say when you think looking forward with the city, which you obviously love, what does it need?
They need to build to win the Super Bowl. That's one. But
on that we agree. But then, yeah, go to the priority too. Then
I would like to see more enlightened leadership. And, not so much just city government, but metropolitan government. I'd like to see the city have a closer working relationship within the village communities. I'm talking the ethnic villages and surrounding town and suburban ethnic villages that have always sort of characterized Buffalo. But I'd also like to see it in the way we looked at regional government, not just municipal government. I didn't like, polling cards and the shot he took at Mayor Brown for the ineffectual, cleanup act with the storm. Well, I thought that was, and this is a 500-year storm, which came after the last 200-year storm. And I thought it was just kind of a cheap shot to, say that the city didn't respond adequately. There was no adequate response to that situation because Mother Nature took over. And I would like to see less of that kind of intergovernmental sniping and discord and cooperation. Whether it's Republican and Democrat or Democrat and Democrat. I'd just like to see Buffalo have a more, regional approach to governance as opposed to, the cities over here, the county is over there, the town governments are over in another place, but never working necessarily as I see it in the benefit of the region.
I think I got the answer to this before I ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have hope for Buffalo?
I do. One of my hopes, ironically, is climate change. I don't know that I will necessarily see the full manifestation of climate change and what the impact it's going to have on our region. But I think it's going to be good. And as Buffalo, be kind of in the corridor that we occupy with Toronto, with other major U.S. cities, I think that global warming is going to affect us in a way that this region will become more hospitable for places looking to maybe relocate, but also to take advantage of the weather that, for the most part, knock on wood, right, doesn't involve, having the 500-year storms every 6 weeks. So I am optimistic for that reason. I'm also optimistic because I am, about two lines. Buffalo is going to, I think, begin to rise. I think a lot of the advancement, within the residential and working class and working community of Buffalo is going to involve a lot of newcomers, immigrants, people from other places and look at Buffalo for its economic value. People who come to Buffalo because, sadly, there are not enough, 21st century qualified people to fill the jobs that need filling here. So we're getting a lot of out-of-towners who have a different lens for looking at Buffalo. I would hope, and that's the other side of it, that, the current population will have an avenue to be part of that growth. And I'm not so sure that the opportunities and institutions are there to propel that segment, that underclass, if you will, to share in what I think are going to be the future growth opportunities.
Greg Brown, what a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Greg Brown is a columnist currently with The Challenger. He's also a former assistant U.S. attorney, and he sat down with us recently at the Broadway Market to talk on Buffalo What's Next. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
Buffalo Toronto Public Media's unique and valued programming on WNED PBS WNED Classical and WBFO make us a perfect partner for any company interested in making a real difference in our community. Your support has the power to associate your business with one of the most trusted brands in North America. Call me, Sylvia Bennett, to find out how you can make a difference. 716-845-7005.
Not sure what you want to watch tonight? We've got you covered. Visit WNED.org/TV schedule to see what's on WNED PBS, WNED Create, and WNED PBS Kids. Click the Primetime button to see what's on tonight. You can also search for your favorite programs in the search bar or look for programs by date and time. Visit WNED.org/TV schedule and start making your viewing plans now.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter @WBFO or email us at news@WBFO.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And up next, Disabilities Desk reporter Emyle Watkins takes a look at how that particular community, people with disabilities, don't always get the resources they need. It's a common theme here on Buffalo What's Next.
You know, it's almost like the working class in poverty. Like you're full time, but you're still below the standard of living wage in this country.
Stay with us.
This is Disabilities Desk reporter Emyle Watkins. I'm joined by Garrett Bush, host of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show and The Barber Shop on Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, Ohio. He's here to discuss Damar Hamlin's cardiac arrest and what often happens to players after they are injured on the field, including the issues they face with disability benefits and their contracts. Garrett, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure of mine, and I'm glad to be here.
I'd like to start by hearing a little bit about you and your work in Cleveland.
Well, this story has a couple of twists, but I'll start by saying I do have a background in Social Security disability. I worked at a company called Centauri Health Solutions, and what they did is they submitted applications on behalf of insurance plans to help some of those members transfer over to Social Security disability. In that process, we would do the diagnosis process where we would gather your information. We would talk to a clinical nurse, disability specialist, and then we would file applications on behalf of those associates because Social Security is a very tough role. It is very difficult to get, and you definitely need a lawyer in order to submit the final case. So our firm did that, and I did that for 8 years here in Cleveland, Ohio. And then during that track, I had always been doing sports talk radio. I started working at 92.3 The Fan as a producer, eventually worked my way up to doing a show, and then eventually got to be doing my own show called The Barber Shop on 92.3 The Fan. Recently, I moved forward with my media career full time, and I started joining as a co-host of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, where I guess this clip that we were talking about today kind of went viral in terms of Damar Hamlin, and then, actually disability and benefits and CTE and a lot of these other things that come along with it. So that's been my long road to where we are today.
Thank you. Before we get into too much about Damar Hamlin and, NFL player benefits specifically, let's talk about SSDI, because I really think that it's something that's wildly misunderstood. And, there is that difficulty of it's not your doctor deciding if you get SSDI. It really is this review board of doctors who have never met you until now. Right.
So Social Security disability is a very hard thing to get. You do have to submit an application before a review board, and they will decide and make a determination based on whether or not that you feel you meet the initial requirements or the requirements for Social Security. So one of the things that is very difficult for people and patients to deal with is you have to amass a large amount of files, medical records. So you have to have, a lot of ongoing concerns, ongoing sicknesses, ongoing medications, and you have to be very stringent in the way you document things, because that is the way the government utilizes and disqualifies people based on whether their documentation is correct. Plus, if you do have the documentation correct, there are some things that you do need to have in order to be able to be eligible. There are income requirements, right? So some people feel like if you're disabled, and you are getting disability check, that you can't work. That's not true. You can still work and get a disability, and be deemed disabled. And it basically comes to a monthly amount, a cap. So you can't go over a certain amount of money. I'm not sure what that number is correct right now. I've been out of the industry for a while, but there is an income cap on it and requirements that go on that as well. So disability is something that faces and affects everyone, not just football players. And when you look at Social Security disability, it is a fixed income. If you do get it, you do have to sometimes have redeterminations based on, you could be short-term disabled, you could be long-term disabled. So there's a lot of different rules and regulations that go into it. And I think what people need to get the most out of disability is, yes, even if you are deemed disabled, it's not a free ride. It's not something where, hey, I get this check and it's just forever, I'm good and secure. People that are on Social Security disability have a lot of different things that they need to pay for. One of the things that is really big is, if you qualify for disability, that means you've had extensive medical history. So cost of care is huge, especially as you get older, through the end stages of your life. Medications are huge, right? What if you have to have some specific therapies? Maybe that's, it's countless of things that you need based on your illness that puts you in the position you are now. And, the income is not that great. It's there to serve as a bare means of making ends meet. But by no stretch of the imagination are you on easy street and taking an easy ride out by having Social Security disability.
Definitely. I mean, I know that from a personal perspective, because I grew up with a parent on SSDI, and, even as a working disabled person, I've had friends come to me and say, well, can't you just go get money from the government? Like, can't you just go get benefits, as if there's like a magical disability benefits fairy just like handing out checks from the government. It's such a difficult process. I know for my dad, it took about a year, and he was very lucky to have it take that short of an amount of time. I mean, how long is this process typically? Because people don't just you don't just, get a disability and then all of a sudden get a check. This is a hard process, and it takes a while. And then, like you said, a lot of people are living in poverty on this SSDI wage.
Yes. Yeah. It's, it's almost like the working class in poverty. Like you're full time, but you're still below, the standard of living wage in this country. So the first time you submitted an application for Social Security disability, the time is a thing. It can take up to 6 months for you to get a determination. It could be 6, and that's if everything goes well. I believe the denial rate is somewhere between 50 and 60% on initial applications for lots of people. So the first application, just imagine you combine all of this stuff, right? And you already have a level of poor health. So you have to go to the doctor. You got to request all those documentations, right? All those documents. Plus, that could cost you money. So you have to gather all these things. Maybe you're on public transit. You got to get the documents. You got to go see the doctors. You gather all of them. It takes 6 months. You turn it in, and then guess what? They tell you, well, we didn't get enough information, or the determination didn't come through the way we wanted to. We don't think that you meet the requirements for Social Security. You can file, once again, an appeal, but that appeals process takes another 3 months. So it could take, theoretically, on a moderate scale, 2 years to just get basic levels of Social Security. Now, they will go back and backdate it from the date that, you were ill. So if I was denied once and then I submitted an appeal, they will backdate that to the date that you submitted the original case. So that is, but the whole time you're submitting these, you're without income, because you can't work if you're not working. and how are you maintaining yourself? So, and then you have to come up with resource requirements. So you have to have affidavits of people who are helping you, because they'll say, okay, well, if you're not working currently, how actually are you supporting yourself? So you'd have to get affidavits from family, friends, maybe different public agencies for people that are under a sort of socioeconomic level. So it's very hard. It could take a long time. It's very grueling. And it's very grueling through the process without very much income or resources or money that come out of it. So that's another difficult part about Social Security.
And one more question about SSDI that comes to mind, and we touched on this, is, a phrase I've heard from people living on SSDI or living on different disability benefits is they call it a system of forced poverty, right? Because you can't make more than a certain amount. You can't have more than a certain amount in your bank account. I mean, that has to be a huge life change for a lot of people, even if they're not an NFL player, to go from whatever they were making at a working wage down to what you make at an SSDI wage, so to speak.
Very tough. They call it spending down those resources. So there are resource limits. So say, for instance, you don't work, you don't have any income coming in, but you do have things like inheritances, right? Or you do have things like, hey, I got a house, right? Or, hey, I got 2 properties, or I got $10,000 in the bank. Well, they count those as resources. So you have to then spend down those resources to a point where you fall under the level in which you can qualify economically or financially in order to get Social Security. So it's almost a double negative almost. It's like, yeah, I do have a little bit of a cushion here, but you want me to spend all my savings just to qualify for $700-800 a month. That doesn't make sense. I'd rather just basically take the $700-800 a month and live off my savings until I don't have anything. But here's the thing: while you're doing that, you don't have any insurance. You could be accumulating lots of medical bills, and so either you're between a rock or a hard place, right? You can go bankrupt easy if you have a lot of medical bills and being sick. So some people just bite the bullet and say, okay, well, I'll take the money for the $10,000 that or whatever is in the bank. I'll use those resources for things like medications or treatments or whatever the case may be, so that they can still apply for Social Security disability and still get the health benefits as well. But it's a conundrum, it's a catch-22 when it comes to your resources, because they do take that into consideration when whether or not you're eligible for Social Security disability.
I think a lot of people who watched the recent episode of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, even without knowing your background, just saw, your passion and your frustration for this topic. And I'd like to ask you, how you're doing and what's been on your mind since Damar was injured.
Oh, well, thank you for, first of all, asking. I do believe we need to ask about, each other's mental health and check up on each other. I'm doing good. That frustration in that moment wasn't really for me. Some people misconstrued it and said, well, maybe he's a little upset because, I did play football in college and I did sustain a lot of injuries that I deal with today. But honestly, it had nothing really to do with me. And my mind was all about Damar and his family at the time, because, right before that happened, one of our contributors on our show, Aditi Keegan-Waller, she is she's worked for the NFL Network, sideline journalist for the NFL, and she talked about him as a person. She had the opportunity to know him back when he was in college at the University of Pittsburgh, and she talked about how he was such a good kid coming up in a really tough neighborhood, and his mother did all that she could in order to make sure that he didn't fall into the streets. He talked about half of his friends dying before the age of 15. His father was incarcerated for 3 years as he was growing up, and his mother was so conscious of this that she worked 2 jobs, one babysitting and the other one cleaning offices at night, and just to put him through private school so that she can make sure that he made it and got to college. And he did. He was a great player, one of the best players in the country, could have went anywhere. But he chose to stay at local, went to University of Pittsburgh because he had a younger brother who was his mother and father reunited. He got another. He had a baby brother, and he wanted to make sure that he was a role model and that he could be around his brother all the time. So he would stay close to home. And so that story really touched me because I know how hard it is for you to, stay out of the streets, and the sacrifice that his mom made, living as a single parent, and cleaning offices and cleaning bathrooms and things like that, just for her son to get an education and stay out of the mix and the streets. For her to see her son go to the league, be at the pinnacle of success, so to speak, and then to go to a game and then a freak episode like a random tackle that I've seen, that a lot of people have seen. It didn't look crazy. It didn't look ridiculous. It wasn't hard. For that to happen and to see your son fall on the field and have to be resuscitated, you just have to think about what she was going through at that time. Like, I did everything I could. To make sure my son was on the right track and he got where he was. And now I got to deal with the prospects of him potentially dying on the football field in front of millions of people. Like, and all he wants to do is just, live a good life. So for me, that frustration came from me, because God forbid he gets off the football field and he never recovers mentally or physically, or he's not able to work. He's not able to earn a living. I'm not able to take care of his children to a certain extent. Who's going to take care of him? Home health care is outrageous. 24-hour care is outrageous. I challenge people to go look at, a person like Rodney Rogers. He's a basketball player for the Denver Nuggets. He was in a 4-wheel accident and he was paralyzed from the chest down. And he was just married. I believe it was either shortly before or shortly after the accident happened. And to see his wife have to take care of him and to feed him and to clothe him and to bathe him, and he had a pension and he had millions, and he's a basketball player, and basketball contracts are guaranteed. You sign tomorrow, you keep all your money, right? Football is not the same. Either you're going to be working or you make the team and you playing to get a game check every game, or you don't get money. So I'm thinking like of his mother being like, hey, I had to wipe and clean toilets for him to get here, and now I have to do that for the rest of his life, and he's 24. I mean, like, that's, for me, I just, that's where I was at that moment. A lot of people see that passion and they may think it came from other places, but it was just understanding the plight of a young man not being even able to live to at the height of what he was going to do. He's just a kid. I'm 41, he's 24. He got a lot in front of him. And for his mother to have to like actually contemplate that, just put me in a bad place. And that's where I spoke from.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, the thing that strikes me about it too is like there are so many young men who go into these sports because the NFL offers that kind of an American dream, this golden paved street to a better life. What is the NFL offering versus what people are actually getting?
Well, I think it's such a catch-22. Like, there's always shades of gray in life, and football, like any other thing, is shades of gray. I live a complicated life with football, because at one point, the business of football, I don't like at all. The sport of football, I owe a lot to that. I cover teams today and cover sports for a living, because I do cover sports. I'm here talking to you. I'm here, and I meet different people. Sports has taught me as a young man. It kept me out of the streets. It gave me something to work towards. It taught me hard work, dedication, and working towards a goal, a common goal with a team, perseverance. It taught me so many great things, and it got me a scholarship to play football in college. So football on one hand has given me a bunch of things, right? And if I had to do it all over again, I would probably do it all over again, which is the tough part about it, because it's the psychological things that go along with it. How do you sign up for something that you know is bad for you, but at the same time good for you, right? You know what the long-term effects of it is on your body, your head, your your spine, your knees. You know what that is. But the reality of it is you also know what positives it can give. At the highest level, football does give you a chance to not only make your life special, but change your family's lives for generations. You look at Damar. You couldn't tell him to turn down football. Like, he's looking at it like this, and a lot of athletes feel like what they want to do is they want to pay it back to their moms, their families, right? They got people looking at them like, yeah, I know my mom sacrificed. There was times where she didn't eat, and I knew she was hungry and working 2 jobs, so we could eat. So you're going to try to do everything in your power to be able to give your mom what you didn't have. You want to be able to, and for a lot of people, it's hard to understand because this is the first generation of people who've ever seen anything, money, success, opportunities. So usually, generally speaking, when you come from a really solid family, you can look at them and say, oh, well, my mom went to college, so I went. My dad went to college, so there you go. My mom and dad were married. Push come to shove, but even if I didn't get a scholarship, I wouldn't freak out like, oh my God, my life is over, because my parents were like, they were there. They'll support me in any which way they can. And I've gotten an advantage that a lot of African Americans haven't. And that's why I'm really, really passionate about, advancement and talking and speaking out, because in one hand, the league does give you an opportunity for that. And we only see the top 10%, the quarterbacks, the Tom Brady's, Aaron Rodgers, the Peyton Mannings, Odell Beckhams, all those guys. First, granted, they get endorsements, all of that. But the majority, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The majority of what the league is lives below the water. And that is the huge sum and the mass of people who don't reach their second contract, right? I kind of paint the picture of this. If you take a guy and he's 6 years old. I didn't start playing football until I was 14. Played basketball, played baseball, didn't play at 14. Take a person like my brother. My brother started at 6. So you play from the age of, in Pop Warner, you play from the age of 6 to 12. That's 6 years right there on your body. You get to middle school, you play another year. That's 9 years. You go to high school, that you play in another 4 year. That's you're already at what 9, 4. That's 13 years you play. You go to college, you could get redshirted. If you spend 5 years in college, it's 5 another. So that's 18 years. So your first contract in the league, you've already put 18 years of wear and tear on your body before you even got a check. So now you go through college and say, for instance, you're great and you leave after 3 years. Well, that's good. So just think, if you get out of college when you're 22, your rookie deal, which is not the big contract, it's the improvement contract, you're already at 27 years of age by the time you can even get generational type money. So what are the chances of you not being hurt? What are the chances of you panning out? What are the chances of you doing all those things and you're 27 years old? And by that time, they're telling you, hey, you're not as fast as you used to be. Hey, the last year of your contract, you're owed $11 million. But what we would like to do is, can we ask you to give 5 or 6 of that back because the team isn't so good and we're up against the cap? They're going to ask you to give that money back. And if you say, no, I want to keep, they'll straight up cut you. So, I mean, is it really a contract? Is it really? No, it's really, hey, we give you a signing bonus. That's the only thing you're guaranteed. And so sometimes when players, hold out for more money, the fans will say, why are you holding out? You're being a selfish millionaire. But they don't understand that their contract isn't guaranteed past this year. So if they don't hold out before the age of 27, they're never going to get that second contract. So those are the different things that I try to, make people cognizant of. The league is good to some people, and the league is great in general when it comes to compensation. These people will make more probably than you will make in your whole life. But always remember, that's the tip of the iceberg. You got to look below the iceberg, and you'll see that, yes, there's a very quick way that you can start struggling to take care of yourself, especially when you're not that high of a draft pick.
Thank you for that perspective, because we see these great athletes, we see the sport that we love, but we don't always see these conversations about the health and the quality of life issues that impact players. There's all these issues that happen after. We just see them in this moment where they're doing really well, but we don't always think about what happens after.
Yeah, that's a sad part of our society. I'm no different from anybody else. I always tell people I love the game of football. I love watching it. I play fantasy, what I'm saying? And, when the Browns lose, it just kills my heart. Just like, like you guys in Buffalo are rabid fans, right? You live and die with your team. But there is a sense of people not understanding or not really quite, relating to people. And I think sometimes because they think that the money gets in the way. When you think about it like this, we had a job fair one time. I think I was in the 6th grade or 5th or 6th grade. And I went up to my teacher and they were like, hey, what do you want to do? We looked at this little book and then we went around and talked to the people. And some people said, I want to be an astronaut. Some people said, I'm going to be a firefighter and all this. So I was looking around and I just asked a question like, hey, Miss Johnson, how much money do you make? And she was like, you're never supposed to ask a professional how much you make. And I'm like, how do I know what I want to do if I don't know how much it gets paid? Like, how much am I getting paid to do this job? And so you get older and you realize that, people get really guarded about how much they make because it changes the perception of the way people think about you. But think about it when you terms of an athlete. There is no other profession in the world where the moment you sign your first contract, the entire world knows it. The entire universe knows how much you make, how many years it is, when you signed it. And so now you're walking around with the scarlet letter on, and people look at you like, oh, you're an athlete. You get everything given to you. Hey, now you're making all this money. But they don't understand and don't take time to understand it. Like, that whole contract is not guaranteed, and everything that you got to do to get it. So when a player does something or gets injured or gets hurt, we lose our humanity a little bit because we in our mind rationalize, well, what did you think was going to happen? You're going to get hurt, or you make $2 million. It is what it is when it comes with that. And instead of thinking about, hey, this person is just doing a profession and that person is compensated based on the amount of revenue that they bring in. We would never, and I'm not comparing this to anything, like, so you got to watch yourself now. We would never say if somebody, got hurt in a war, we wouldn't say, well, you know what you signed up for. You would be a little more sensitive to that. You would say, thank you for your service, because it is valiant. It is honorable to volunteer to go do something that's dangerous. But I think sometimes as humans, we get really callous when money is involved, because we tend to say, okay, well, money equates all happiness, and you got paid $5 million, so who cares if you're maimed for the rest of your life? I just think that's kind of where we're at in human nature when it comes to athletes a little bit.
And that will do it for today's episode of the program. This is Buffalo What's Next. Thanks to Emily's guest, Garrett Bush, and earlier in the program, Jay Moran speaking with Greg Brown. If you missed anything and you'd like to hear it again, a reminder that this program is a podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, and each episode is also online, on demand, at WBFO.org. This is WBFO